day you stop needing people, everything changes. This is not motivation. It's a cold psychological reality that exposes how human behavior and power dynamics actually work. As long as you depend on anyone for emotional validation, financial support, or social approval, you become predictable. And predictable people are not openly controlled. They are quietly steered through pressure, guilt, and subtle manipulation of situations. This is where Machiavellian thinking begins. The basic rule of power is simple. The moment someone senses that you need them, your perceived value drops, no matter how skilled or capable you are. People don't always disrespect you directly, but they start testing your loyalty, your limits, and your boundaries more aggressively because need signals compromise. And in the real world, those who constantly compromise lose leverage over time. The point here is not to become emotionless or detached. It's about understanding what changes when dependency decreases. Your reactions slow down, your decisions become less emotional, and your presence starts carrying a different kind of weight. People notice this shift even when nothing is said out loud. But don't skip the final law at the end of this video. It ties everything together and shows the exact mental shift that separates control from dependence. Law 1. The illusion of need is your weakness. The moment you start needing people, you lose control without even noticing it. Need is not something that is always visible, but it leaks through your behavior, overthinking messages, waiting for replies, lowering your standards, and changing your stance just to avoid losing someone. Machiavellian reality is simple. Power is not taken directly. It is surrendered slowly through dependency. The second you need someone's approval, attention, or presence, you stop operating from a position of control and start reacting to their actions, and that reaction itself puts you one step behind in every interaction. This shift is subtle but extremely powerful. The less you depend on someone, the more weight your presence carries, because people can instinctively sense when you are not desperate for anything from them. Human psychology naturally respects detachment and tests dependency. If you are too available, you become predictable and easier to ignore. If you are less predictable and not easily influenced, your value increases without you saying anything. This is why in real life, the person who needs less usually controls the pace, tone, and direction of interaction without ever openly trying to dominate it. In every area of life, this pattern repeats itself: relationships, friendships, business, and even casual conversations. The one who is less emotionally attached sets boundaries without effort, while the one who is dependent silently adjusts to maintain connection. Nothing dramatic happens on the surface, but underneath, the balance shifts completely and permanently. This law is uncomfortable because it attacks a basic human instinct for validation and connection, but the truth remains direct. Connection without independence becomes dependency, and dependency is the exact point where control quietly disappears. Law 2. People reveal their true nature when you stop chasing them. One of the most dangerous illusions in life is believing that people stay because they care. In reality, many people stay because of convenience, attention, benefits, entertainment, or habit. As long as you keep calling first, texting first, helping first, and making all the effort, you never discover who is genuinely loyal and who is simply enjoying the advantages of your presence. The truth remains hidden because your constant effort covers it. The moment you stop chasing, everything becomes clear. Some people disappear without explanation. Some become distant. Some only return when they need something, and a very small number stay exactly the same. That moment is painful because it destroys the image you had created in your mind, but it also reveals reality. People rarely tell you what role you play in their lives. Their actions tell you when your effort is removed. This is why powerful people pay attention to behavior, not words. Words are cheap because they cost nothing. Effort, time, consistency, and loyalty have a cost. Anyone can promise support, respect, or friendship when conditions are easy. The real test begins when you stop providing attention and stop making things convenient. Suddenly, masks start falling without a single confrontation. Machiavelli understood that information is power, and one of the fastest ways to gather information about people is to step back and observe. When you stop chasing, you create silence, and silence forces people to reveal their intentions. Some will move closer because they value you. Others will move away because they valued what you gave them. The difference becomes impossible to ignore. The brutal truth is that losing fake connections is not a loss. It is the removal of an illusion. Most people fear being abandoned, so they keep chasing relationships that should have ended long ago. But every time you chase someone who is already pulling away, you trade self-respect for false hope. The moment you stop, reality finally has nowhere left to hide. Law 3. The person who controls their emotions controls the situation. Most people think power comes from money, status, intelligence, or influence. But in reality, the first battle of power is fought inside the mind. The person who loses control of their emotions loses control of the situation. Anger, desperation, jealousy, fear, and frustration are not just feelings, they are information. The moment your emotions become visible, observant people know exactly where to apply pressure. This is why emotional reactions are often expensive. When someone insults you and you instantly react, they learn what triggers you. When someone ignores you and you become desperate for attention, they learn what controls you. When criticism destroys your confidence, people discover your weak spots without having to ask a single question. Every uncontrolled reaction becomes a map that reveals your vulnerabilities. Machiavellian thinking is not about becoming emotionless. It is about refusing to let emotions take command. Powerful people feel the same anger, disappointment, and fear as everyone else, but they do not allow those emotions to make decisions for them. They observe first, think second, and act last. While others are trapped inside the heat of the moment, they are already calculating the consequences. Look at everyday life. During arguments, the first person who loses emotional control usually loses influence. In negotiations, the desperate person accepts bad terms. In relationships, the person who cannot control their emotions becomes predictable. The calmer individual gains an advantage not because they are stronger, but because they are harder to manipulate. The brutal truth is that most people are not controlled by others. They are controlled by their own emotions. Their anger controls them. Their fear controls them. Their need for validation controls them. And anyone who can predict your emotions can often predict your next move. The moment you master your emotional responses, you become far more difficult to influence, deceive, or control. That is why true power is rarely loud. It is usually silent, patient, and completely in command of itself. Law 4. The more you explain yourself, the weaker you appear. One of the most overlooked laws of human psychology is this: people often respect certainty more than explanations. The moment you start over-explaining every decision, action, or choice, you unintentionally put yourself in a defensive position. Instead of appearing confident, you begin to look as if you are seeking approval or permission. And once people sense that, they start questioning you even more. Most people believe that if they explain themselves enough, everyone will understand their intentions. Reality works differently. Those who dislike you will not suddenly agree with you because of a longer explanation, and those who respect you rarely need one. The more you justify yourself, the more opportunities you create for criticism, doubt, and manipulation. Every unnecessary explanation reveals a little more about your fears and insecurities. Machiavelli understood that power often exists in restraint. Powerful people do not rush to defend themselves against every accusation or misunderstanding. They know that constantly explaining yourself places your reputation in the hands of others. Instead, they allow actions to speak where words would only create weakness. Silence creates mystery, and mystery often earns more respect than endless justification. Look at everyday life. When someone confidently says no, people usually accept it. But when that same person spends 10 minutes explaining why, others begin searching for weaknesses and ways to change their mind. The explanation turns into a negotiation. The brutal truth is that many people do not explain because clarity is needed. They explain because they fear judgment, rejection, or being misunderstood. The person who is comfortable with their decisions rarely feels the need to convince everyone. The moment you stop seeking validation for every choice, your words gain more weight and your decisions become harder to challenge. Law 5. Never let people know how much they affect you. One of the harshest truths about human nature is that the moment people realize they have power over your emotions, some will consciously or unconsciously begin using it. The more someone knows they can make you angry, jealous, desperate, or insecure, the more influence they gain over your decisions. What begins as an emotional reaction eventually becomes a weakness that others can predict and control. Most people reveal too much without realizing it. They show how hurt they are, how badly they want attention, how much rejection affects them, and how deeply someone's opinion matters to them. In doing so, they hand over a roadmap to their emotional vulnerabilities. Once people know which buttons trigger you, pressing those buttons becomes effortless. Machiavelli understood that power often belongs to the person who remains difficult to read. The less others understand your emotional state, the harder it becomes to manipulate you. This does not mean suppressing every feeling or pretending not to care. It means refusing to place your emotional stability in someone else's hands. When your reactions become predictable, your behavior becomes predictable. And when your behavior becomes predictable, control quietly shifts away from you. Look at everyday life. The person who becomes visibly upset at criticism receives more criticism. The person who appears desperate for attention receives less respect. The person who constantly proves how much they care often ends up caring far more than the other side. In each case, emotional exposure creates an imbalance that others quickly notice. The brutal truth is that many people lose power long before they lose opportunities, relationships, or status. They lose it the moment they allow others to dictate how they feel. The strongest position is not feeling nothing. It is maintaining control, even when you feel everything. When people can no longer predict your emotional reactions, they lose one of the easiest ways to influence your decisions. That is when your presence becomes harder to shake, harder to pressure, and far more powerful than before.